So today's lesson is focused on solving two-step equations. We already practiced one step and now we're moving forward. But in order to solve two steps, we need to recall how to solve a one-step equation. So please pause the video, complete the warm-up, then come back and check your solution. So if you look at my work, number one, the answer is x equals 12. And then in orange, I checked my answer and I was correct. Number two, x equals -9. Notice I also checked my work on all of these. Number three, we had to multiply to undo that dividing, so x equaled -40. Number four was multiplying, so to undo that we used division, so x was 12. And in number five, it was the same idea, except for we had decimals. To undo the subtracting, we added, and we ended up with x equals 9.04. Now, if we think about solving equations, let's start with building an equation, and then we'll go back and solve. So we first have the variable g. So on my line, I'm going to start with g. At this point, we don't know what g equals, but that's okay, because we're going to keep building an equation. Next, I need to multiply by 2. So typically, we've seen our g multiplied by 2. However, remember, we're beyond using this type of notation right here. And instead, we're going to write it as 2g. Number goes first, variable goes second. Our next one tells us to add 10 to our 2g. So I have 2g, and I'm going to plus 10. And then last but not least, our expression from above is going to equal 20. So we're going to take 2g plus 10, and we're going to set it equal to 20. Right there we have our equation. So let's start with that on the other side. 2g plus 10 equals 20. And what I want to do is I'm going to solve. So I draw my line, and I'm going to highlight my variable. And when I highlight my variable, what I'm really trying to do is that clump with my variable, I have to get it by itself first. So notice if I would work backwards, I added 10. That was my last thing I did after it was equal. That's the first thing I'm going to undo. So the first thing I have to do is get rid of plus 10. So I have to minus 10. And when I do that, my 10s cancel. They're a 0. They're gone. I still have that 2g clump, but now it only equals 10. Because 20 minus 10 is 10. That right there is our first step. Our second step is we still need to get g by itself. So we have to get rid of the 2. 2 times g, we're undoing multiplication, divide. Divide by 2 on both sides of that line. My 2's in this case canceled. So now I have just g, finally, and that equals 10 divided by 2 is 5. That was my second step. And then I came up with my answer. However, like always, check your work. When I check, I had 2 times what I think is 5 plus 10, and it hopefully equals 20. Start with your multiplication. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 plus 10 is 20. It checks out. So g does equal 5. So notice the first thing we had to undo was that adding, and our second thing we undid was the multiplying. This next slide is almost the same type of idea. So we're going to build our equation and then solve it. This time though, we're starting with y. So I have y. We have to divide it by 4. Now remember, it's going to look like a fraction. We have our y divided by 4. A lot of students want to write 4y, but that's multiplication. And then some students want to write 4 over y, but that's 4 divided by y, which is not what we want. We want y divided by 4. Now we're going to take that and subtract 2. So I have y divided by 4, subtract 2, and that is going to equal 6. y divided by 4, subtract 2, equals 6. Notice we don't know what y is, so we have to undo our things to solve. Y divided by 4 minus 2 equals 6. I draw my line down the middle, and I am trying to get y by itself. I have to get that clump alone first, so I'm going to undo. If I work backwards, that's subtract 2. Opposite of subtracting is adding, so add 2 to both sides. Those cancel because they're 0, but I still have this clump. Y divided by 4, now it equals 8. I still am working on getting this y alone, because I'm not done quite. So to undo the next step where we divided, I'm going to multiply. Multiply by that 4, so that they cancel, and I have finally y by itself. And then I just have to solve. 8 times 4 is 32. So I'm pretty sure y is 32, but I have to check. So I have 32 instead of y divided by 4 minus 2 equals 6. So if we divide, we get 8 minus 2, and it does equal 6. So y is 32. And here's the whole point of building and undoing. When I was solving, the first thing I had to undo always was either the adding or subtracting. You're always going to reverse those steps first. The next thing you'll always reverse, or our second thing you'll reverse, is the multiplication, or multiplying and dividing. Those always get reversed second. And really, what this is related to is PEMDAS, or our order of operations. And we use PEMDAS when we check our work. So when we were checking our solutions, we did the multiplication or division, and then we added or subtracted. When we solve, okay, so when we work backwards and solve for our variable, that's when I start by undoing my adding or subtracting. And then I undo the multiplying and dividing. We will use orange. You work the opposite direction. You work forwards to check, but first you work backwards when you solve. So here we have a problem to try. Two-step equation. And I'm going to just rewrite it so I have more space. Negative 3x plus 5 equals 2. Draw our line. And remember, we're trying to get this x by itself. But first we have to get the clump by itself. So I need to undo my adding 5. So let's minus 5. Now I have negative 3x, because those canceled, equals negative 3. If I'm still trying to get this x by itself, I have to undo that multiplication. So I divide by that whole thing outside. So I'm going to divide both sides by that negative 3, so that since these match, they cancel. Now I finally have my x equals, and negative 3 divided by negative 3 is positive 1. Let's check our work to make sure we did it correctly. Always use your original when you check. Negative 3 times positive 1 plus 5, hopefully will 2. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. Negative 3 plus 5 does equal negative 2. Checked out, so our x equals 1. Notice I kept it balanced. And when I solved, I undid the adding, subtracting. Then I undid multiplying, dividing. However, when I checked, I started with multiplying or dividing, and then I moved on to adding, subtracting. Reverse orders, solving versus checking. I would like you to try these 3 on your own. Note with number 2, because we have parentheses, the first thing you have to do is distribute before you can solve. So pause the video, complete these 3 problems, and then come back and check your answers. So you'll notice that for number 1, we undid the adding by subtracting, and then we undid the multiplying by dividing. And I ended up with x equals 4. I checked my work and I was correct. Number 2, I gave you the hint to distribute first. So we changed our problem into 3x minus 12 equals 9. Undid the subtraction, undid the multiplication, x equals 7. And last but not least, with number 3, notice those are like terms. So 7x minus 10x, I figured out first, made it negative 3x equals 15. I went from a problem that looked kind of complicated to something actually quite basic, a one-step. Divided by negative 3 and I got x equals negative 5. Checked my solution and I was correct. Now, remember, don't forget to check your work. Take it slowly and you will get there. If your check doesn't work, go back and try again. And always try to simplify first, okay? So that's why I distribute first, or I combine my like terms, because it makes the problem easier rather than making your life harder. Now, if we move forward, we have fractions. It doesn't really matter, though. It's the same process. Draw the line. Oops. Let's undo that. Draw the line. Let's highlight what I'm solving for. Let's get rid of the first thing. I want to get rid of the thing next to the clump. So I'm going to add my number. Add the 1/2 to both sides. These are going to cancel. So x over 8 equals, let's go off of that, negative 7/2 plus 1/2. Well, negative 7 plus 1 is 6/2. It's negative 6. And negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So it really just equals negative 3. Now I'm back to one step. To solve, I have to multiply to undo that dividing. Those cancel, and I get x equals negative 24. However, always check your work because you never know if you're right. So I had negative 24 over 8 minus 1/2. Hopefully it's negative 7/2. Well, negative 24 over 8, if I divide that, I know that that's going to be negative 3. And I have to minus 1/2, so let's hope it equals negative 7/2. And negative 3, if I put it over 2, negative 3 over 1, and I wanted to change it over 2, I'd multiply by 2, so let's multiply by 2, it's negative 6. So we have negative 6 over 2 minus 1 is negative 7. It checks out. Negative 24 is my answer. It's the same process, and the fractions are not that challenging. Please complete these two on your own. Do not worry about the fractions, because when they're with the variables, it's really just dividing. And try those two, pause the video, check your work, and then come back and check your answer. So after doing the work, you'll notice that for number 4, m equals 8, and I checked my answer. And for number 5, a equals negative 2/5. This was definitely a more challenging problem, but it's still doable if you use your fraction rule. So we had to divide fractions, reduce fractions, and then go ahead and add them as well.